Hey Computer, play About Bees podcast.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome back once again to another exciting episode of About Bees, Culture and Curiosity with your host, me, Ron Miksha, and my host, my best. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. You're gonna build me up. Okay.
I was going to, but you blew it, so no build up for you. Bidzina, hi.
Hello. How are you doing?
I'm okay. I'm a little bummed out about our weather now. We had a beautiful weekend. Last weekend was so incredibly nice. It was, what was it? It must have been 20. We had breakfast, lunch, and supper out on our deck, and it just was so gorgeous. It was just really nice. And now, for the last several days, it's been raining off and on. We do need the rain. So not complaining about rain, but the temperature's only been like 10, 12, 15. It's just too cold when it's raining and the sun is overcast everywhere. But other than that, I'm okay. My health has held up for another week, and I'm pretty sure I'll make it all the way to the end of this podcast even. So
No.
Yeah.
I have my fingers crossed. So
Yeah, and last weekend. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. And I hope you hold out to the end of this too. You've been working pretty hard. And last weekend, why don't you tell us about the open house I think you had last weekend with Herman Van Reekum and his cube, BeeCube. I like to call it the apiary in a box.
That is a good way to put it. It went well, So Herman, we had him on the podcast a couple episodes back, I think season 2 or whatnot, episode 16. So if anybody wants to check it out, actually, no, it's not. Just forget everything guys just said about that episode. That's not numbered anymore that way. But sorry. So we had him on the podcast, and he showed us one of his prototypes. He's built 5 this year, and he's building 2 more. And the 5 have been deployed. One of them has bees in it. We did a ribbon cutting ceremony. And
tell us about it. Tell us about the ribbon.
Yeah. So, we had people. There was 11 colonies inside of this, about 11 colonies inside the shed, and they're nukes, but they're still very strong and they're flying around everywhere. It was a nice hot day, so everybody had suits on. So we had about 10 people there, and everybody had a beekeeping suit. But eventually, people got comfortable enough where they took off their hats. We popped open a sparkling juice champagne, non-alcoholic, and it was very interesting. It was nice. It was a cross the Anne and Sandy's cross conservation area. So it's a beautiful protected ecosystem where now the bees live amongst the native. It's all the native critters. Yeah.
And did you do any recording, any videoing of what was going on? You did?
Yes, we did. Yep.
Good.
We got some video, and we have it all over the BeeCube, Instagram and LinkedIn, and you could check it up on YouTube as well. And it's just BeeCube pretty much on Instagram, just BeeCube, BEE, the word cube, and you'll find it show up. And then if you want to check out the website, it's beecube.io, the letter I and then the letter O, like I owe money.
Oh no, I hope it's not a lot.
No. Well, it stands for input and output, as in input information, and you get information out.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's okay. So that's a pretty easy one. An address. Maybe we can post that address in some of the notes on this episode, and then people can go look at the grand opening and the uncorking of the champagne bottle. That would be really super. Yeah.
And sorry, I forgot to mention, we as we did the ribbon cutting ceremony, we also unveiled the Great Canadian Bee Race. So the Great
What?
Canadian, yes, that's right, the Great Canadian Bee Race. You've heard it here, folks, for the first time. But we've launched it last week. So anybody that creates a new beehive in Canada and posts a photo of themselves with a hashtag Great Canadian Bee Race since last week, you will be put into our tracking mechanism that we're developing, where we're going to have 10,000 beehives across Canada. That's our goal by 2030. And we want all other beekeepers to help us in that Canadian beekeeper. So if you make a new beehive since last week, post it, it counts. If it's Canadian, and if it's new beehive, it doesn't have to be in a BeeCube. It can be in any sort of design you like. As long as it's a beehive and it's legal, it counts, and it has to be Canadian.
Okay. Now, let's say I want to do this, and I do. It sounds really exciting. It sounds like fun. So, what do I do then? I take a picture of just the bees, the beehive.
You take a picture of yourself with the beehive, and then we also ask somehow to prove that it's happening. It's actually happened. So, if possible, get a newspaper where you can take a picture of the date that this has actually happened, that it's a timestamp essentially, so you get a recent newspaper, take a picture, your local recent newspaper, where you are, of the date, and of the beehives, and hey, I've created a new beehive, hashtag Great Canadian Bee Race. And once we have the metric loading bar, we're going to have a live recording. So you could go to a website and you'll be able to track how many new beehives have been created since this unveiling of the Great Canadian Bee Race. But internally, we want to do 10,000 with the BeeCube. So that's 500 BeeCubes across Canada, roughly.
Right. 500. Wow. And sure. And I'm thinking, like, what do you mean by new beehive? Like, I have 2 hives in my backyard, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
So
those
if
those don't count?
those don't count, it has to be if you create a nuke from those beehives, you did exactly. So you might be in the time frame that we've launched it. So as long as if you create a new nuke from a beehive, or you create a new hive, you make a split, you make a package, and that package gets established, it counts as a beehive. It has to be you can't be creating a package and selling it. I mean, that also kind of indirectly counts. You could be like, get a half a score for that. You made
What
like
about
half
somebody who catches a swarm? Like, if you catch a swarm, is that going to
right.
count?
So if you catch a swarm, yes, that will count. If you catch a swarm and you house it and it's successful, and it's successful over winter, it would count. So this is the rough little area where it gets tricky. How do we track the winter losses? Which is that. So we have to, like, whoever is involved in this, they have to be actively working with us, and we want to create a leaderboard. So this is kind of a friendly competition to see who has the most who's created the most bees since this launch of the Great Canadian Bee Race. And maybe, who knows, maybe the number one place might get some sort of prize, maybe a BeeCube,
Maybe.
free. Yeah,
get a BeeCube. Yeah.
it's $25,000. But that's what the retail price is, and the material that's involved, and it's high quality, premium, handcrafted craftsmanship. It's the paint that's used on it is actually was suggested by the carpenter. It's used in marine technology, like marine paint. So this is the paint will withstand any sort of weathering for decades to come.
Fantastic. This
Yeah.
sounds great. Sounds great. Okay, it sounds like a lot of fun. I guess I should be involved in it too. At least take a picture of myself and send it in.
Well, if you, yes, I think if you on your
If
own
if I
profile,
have a if I have a frame
yeah,
with a queen on it, and I and maybe a newspaper dangling
yep,
from my mouth,
yeah.
and or would it be okay if that like I'd have to go out and buy a newspaper? I do all my newspapers online these days. So would it be okay if I just wrote down the date on a piece of paper and held that up?
Now, I think this has to be on the honor system. I agree. So maybe that we might have to give some allowance for just we got to base it on the honor system. And let's say so when someone searches on the social media, great hashtag Great Canadian Bee Race, all these images will pop up. One of them will be yours. And let's say one day, we go on there and there's 15, 20 of the same guy. There's a Great Canadian Bee Race. I've created a new beehive, new. So we would probably verify with that person eventually if they start to it gets out of hand. So yeah, so I think that should be allowed because it's basically on the honor system. This is supposed to
Yeah.
be a friendly competition, like a donation thing, like see like kind of a track and
If
progress bar to see
if
how
it's a
many hives.
competition, it's not friendly. There's no such thing as a friendly competition. If it's a competition, it's do or die. You want to win. You got to, otherwise, why compete? Right?
It's
So it's not
well,
friendly. And I'm
it's a
thinking I'm going to have the date written on a piece of paper. Maybe I'll use one of those big fancy Sharpies, like a black Sharpie, like the American president uses. And then just make my letters and numbers, kind of like a seismic graph, and yeah, like an earthquake, and then that'll be the date, and that'll be maybe maybe I'll just staple it to my cheek or something so I don't have to hold it, and then I'll hold a frame, and the frame will
yeah.
have a queen on it, and I will tell you guys that I am about to make a new hive, and
You
then
could do a video as well if you'd like. If it doesn't have to be a picture, it could be a video as well.
no, I'm just wanting to do the picture because after the picture's taken, I'm going to just put that frame right back in the same hive it came out of.
Well, exactly. So that's what I'm saying. So maybe you could do it once, you could do it twice, and we're gonna have some margin of error. But let's say if Ron decides to do that every week, hey, I've created a new
Yep.
beehive. Hey,
Yep.
we're gonna verify with Ron, and if
Hmm.
Ron can't prove it, we're gonna delete all the pictures and take you off the tracker.
That hurts. That really hurts. I Just because I cheated, you're going to take away all my pictures off the internet. Okay, why don't we move on? This sounds fun. It sounds
It
interesting,
does,
and it's
yeah,
only
exactly.
Canadians, right? Only Canadians.
It's it's just a Canadian thing right now. It's a Canadian, but we want to do
Okay.
10,000. But hey, if we hit that goal way
Mhm.
sooner than expected, maybe we'll go international, and it'll be
Okay. Well, I hope
and
so because our
yeah.
podcast it's listened by the podcast part. I don't know how your YouTube is doing with the videos that you make out of these things, but the podcast part is listened to by more Americans than Canadians. That makes
Wow.
sense because there are 10 times as many Americans as there are Canadians. So, the Americans are listening to us as we speak. There are Americans out there. I'm picturing a young Ron, a young me, sitting in a truck, just pulled into the bee yard. My
Yep.
smoker is still burning from the last apiary that I just went through. And I'm sitting there and I'm exhausted, I'm sticky and it's hot, but I've got the radio. Well, not the radio. Okay, I've got my podcast player going and I'm listening to the old Ron talking right now. And and I'm hearing about all these lucky Canadians who get their picture on the internet. And I'm thinking I should be one of those too. That's how I would have felt in those days when I used to keep bees down in Florida. That's exactly how I would have felt. Left out,
If-
like not in the loop.
beekeeping has a bit of a FOMO. It's a fear of missing out. And I think if the person, if especially with these online personalities, I'm trying to attempt to do the same thing with beekeep, but there's a lot of people that have like millions of followers online where they just go and rescue bees, and they're in their, like, it's girls, it's like, they're just in their tank top and short shorts, and they're having the time of their life. And I think it's really making people rethink stinging. They're like, I don't think bees sting, because for some reason everybody thinks they're like, if you get stung, you're gonna die or something. I don't know. That's like
You could.
you could,
There's
but
an absolute possibility you could.
very rare. It's
Yeah, and you would only die once.
I think in yeah, you would only die once, right? But I think in the previous episodes we concluded that it's almost as rare as getting a coconut dropped on your head and dying, because that happens as well.
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah,
don't go
you
on a
did mention
vacation.
that, and I'll admit that I didn't believe you, and you looked up the numbers, and then we had to calculate it because the numbers were only for certain areas,
Right.
and you can't extend coconuts around the world because we don't have coconut palm trees growing here in Canada, for example.
Right.
But you turned out to be, if not 100% correct, at least certainly in the same direction. About as many people die from a coconut falling out of a tree and hitting them in the middle of the head. Oh man.
Yeah, like
Can you
we
imagine?
shouldn't say like almost exact, but the numbers are so close where it's like you can.
They're very close. Yeah,
Yeah.
very close.
Yeah.
And could you imagine if you were down there, the vacation of a lifetime, and you're there, by the ocean, and you're looking up and you see this big coconut, and it just starts to fall. And at the same time, you get stung under the cheek by a bee.
And you're allergic.
Absolutely, you're
Eh,
allergic
yeah,
of
both
the
of them.
coconut
You're
falling.
coconut
Yes,
and
both of them.
bees. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
Hey, I know
that's
another
like
place where
lightning striking
coconuts.
this.
Yep.
It's like lightning
Yes,
striking in the same spot. That's, or well, that's actually more. That's common apparently.
that's pretty common. Yeah, if it's
Yeah.
going to strike the church's tall spire sticking up once, it's going to hit it probably every summer. But the idea of coconuts not growing in Canada reminds me that there are no coconut trees, palm trees, growing in Denmark. And
Hmm.
I just thought of that Denmark
Well,
doesn't have them either. And
I,
Denmark is, yes.
you'll be
Go
safe
ahead.
then when you go there this in September.
When I go there in September, first of all, my
But you
paper
got to
has
be
been
aware of the
accepted.
pot smoking
Yes,
hippies, though. I
I've heard that, and I don't care. Let them do what they want to do. I don't mind as long as they don't poke me in the face.
oh,
So yeah, do I get to go to Denmark? That depends entirely on whether or not my hang on, there's an email here. I didn't see this one. Huh.
just,
My paper was accepted. I'm going to be going to Denmark.
did you
I just
just
saw it.
receive it right now? Are you serious?
No, I got it a couple weeks
Oh,
ago.
okay. Wait. No, let's go with the bit. I got a little rip in my thing, but just go with the bit. It's incredible. You
It is
just
incredible.
It
Yeah.
just popped up right
Just
now.
got it. Just popped up right now in my head. So yeah, my paper has been accepted, and it's going to be a discussion about the relationship between native bees and honeybees, and the fact that in many cases they do not feast on the exact same plants. So that's
Hmm.
basically the core, but I've got statistics, I've got, this beautiful pictures. I mean, the you have never seen pictures like the ones. Well, there will be the one of me holding the comb with that paper stapled to my cheek. But other than that, this I'm hoping people come to Denmark. I've only been to Denmark once in my life. I loved it. It's a beautiful, rainy, melancholy, sad place. But despite the whatever Hamlet and Shakespeare might have made us think about Denmark. It was great. It was great. I liked it when I was there 25 years ago, and being able to go back again now is in the fall I'm just looking forward to it. Yeah.
No, that is actually something to really consider. And I am considering it because it could work. Like September is a very slow time in university. We don't run, we're just kind of gearing up. And as long as I make my professors aware of what like my plans are, and we accommodate, should be fine. Yeah, I just
You might
gotta
have to write a paper about being there.
right. I think Herman will be there. Herman's going there.
Oh, good, good. I know
Yeah.
somebody else here in town that's also going to be there. I'm looking forward to seeing
Yeah.
him and his wife over there. And if Herman's going, ooh, this is getting better and better. Yeah,
Well, I'm
looking
thinking
forward
if
to that a lot.
he's going there on behalf of BeeCube, and I'm wondering if he can maybe get another ticket for me as well for BeeCube, and I'll pay for my flight expenses. That should be and accommodations and stuff. That I think that because the ticket I think is $1,300 to get into the conference or something, or am I mistaken?
That might be for an exhibitor to have a
Okay.
space. I think if you're attending, it's still pretty pricey. It's still going to be, I don't remember the number off the top of my head. I'm such a good speaker and they wanted me to be there. And so they're just bringing me in for free. But
Wow. Are
no,
they
no, no, they're not. No, I have to pay. I have to pay. And I don't think it's more than about $300-400 US for the full conference.
so it's 325 euros. So
Mm.
or 425 if you register after September. So 325 euro to CAD. So it's about $500, $500 Canadian, which is that's not if I can get a cheap
That's a lot.
flight. It is a
It's a lot
lot
of
for a
money.
conference, but yeah, if I can get the conference paid for by the BeeCube,
But
I'll have to
look
talk
at it the
Herman
other
if
way.
yeah.
Like it may sound like a lot to a lot of people who are listening to this podcast, but just think, it's an opportunity to meet me in person.
Yes.
I've know people who pay a lot more than that to say hello to me. So I
I
think it's a
I
good
agree.
deal. It's a good
You
deal.
know,
Hey, you had something else going on in your you were reading something to me a little earlier that
yeah, so
there was this. Yeah, tell me about this. What is
something
let's build it up a little bit. Is this the most incredible story you've ever heard in your life?
this is probably the biggest story in beekeeping history we've heard in beekeeping we've heard in a while here in Alberta. It gets a little stale with
No, I
people.
don't think it's that big of a deal, but
Uh,
it's a pretty unfortunate thing, isn't it?
it is exactly. It is pretty unfortunate, and some might have already figured out what we're talking about. But there's been recent
I haven't even. I don't even
no
know what we're talking about, but go with it.
no it's the bee thefts. Bees are being stolen left
The
and
bee
right.
what?
Bee
The bee
theft,
thefts.
bee heist,
Bee
or I
heist.
call yeah. It was like imagine like a pink panther came down to steal the pink diamond, but instead they got the Queen Jubilee, or the she is like a jewel. If you actually when you look into it and when they're on a frame, it does look like a jewel, especially when it's painted. But yeah, there was a bunch of bees stolen here in Alberta, and 800,000 to be exact. 800,000. They counted every single one of them.
That is pretty exact. Not
Yeah.
802,000, like not
No.
800,002 or anything like that. No, 800,000 bees were stolen from where?
Let's pull up the article here. We don't want to
Okay,
mess up any details.
okay.
All right. So we got a Calgary Herald. And this was
Calgary
written,
Herald.
yeah, local news. We got it from the Stephen Wilhelm, written by, published May 2nd. So this is very recent,
Yes, it
over
is.
yeah. So I'll just get right into the headline here. So over 800,000 bees stolen from far southeast of Calgary. And in quotes from the person that had the bee stolen, bee theft at this scale, I've never heard of it, said John Swimers. How do you say it?
No M in there. Swires. Swires. It's yeah.
Beekeeper. Yeah, John Swires, beekeeper at Honey Meadows Farm outside of Calgary. And then we have John Swimers here. Yeah. He's I listened to video to him, and he's very devastated about what happened.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, anybody would be, but yeah, he's.
So how many colonies is 800,000 bees? Like at this time of the year, this is the time of the year to steal bees, by the way, because the colonies usually don't have a second box on if they're newly established, if they're splits or if they're from packages, and they're relatively weak, like small, so you can load up a whole bunch of them and cart them away. I'm going to guess maybe 10 to 20,000 bees in each of his units. Right. So at that rate, it could be, I don't know, a few, like 100 colonies of bees, maybe something in that range, or maybe a little less. I don't know. How many does it say?
So Calgary area beekeepers dismayed after dozens of beehives were stolen in unprecedented beehives. In total,
dozens.
57 beehives were, so you're pretty close, 57.
Okay.
Stolen from different locations in Foothills County, southeast of Calgary, according to John Swimers.
Okay.
Beekeeper.
Swires.
Each beehive can house. We did that. This week has been certainly emotional roller coaster, Swires said. At one of the 4 sites where beehives were snatched by thieves, only 4 hives remain. 18 were stolen. I can't really put a price tag on what's lost. It's priceless what's been taken. These bees been with us for close to 40 years. A little bit of exaggeration.
Wow. I don't think so. He maybe had those locations for 40 years.
Right. And been using the same.
I don't think he meant that the bees themselves are 40 years old.
Yeah,
that would be like, yeah.
Yeah. So we do have quite a few sites, so we'll be able to balance. Swire said, noting this family farm has about 300 sites scattered throughout the area. Swire Farms only produces.
Okay, hang on. No. There was an apiary that 18 colonies were stolen, leaving 4 behind. That's 22. So if he's running roughly 20 colonies and 300 apiaries, that's a 6,000 colony business.
That is correct. That's quick maths from Ron.
That's a big honey farm.
That's a big
honey farm. They're just south. It's southeast of Calgary.
Yeah, in the Foothills County.
Yeah.
Right. So
that's close to Montana, folks, for those of you in the States that are listening in.
Yes. However, so Swire's farm only produces honey, a cause for worry if hives continue to be stolen. However, it'll be a bit of a shaky feeling putting beehives back where they were. The question is, do we trust that this won't get hit again? It feels
no,
like
you don't trust that.
Right. It feels like a violation.
Yeah,
of property rights.
Yes. Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It is.
Well, we have, there's law for cattle theft. There's and if you could look into the the Canadian Criminal Code conduct, and you'll find a whole section about cattle theft. And so I don't exactly know what they would charge this person with, but it probably falls somewhere around, and it is an indictable offense. It's not.
Oh, it's stealing.
Yeah,
it's stealing. You can't help it. You've got to hold them responsible. Like, you can't go into a first of all, it's some other farmer's property. Most likely, it's not the same farmer that the bees are sitting on their property. No, that wouldn't have happened. It's somebody else who came along and saw the bees there, drove in at night, loaded them up, left a few behind. I'm wondering why you'd leave a few behind, and it might be that the farmer, like in a lot of cases, if I had in the old days when I had, quite a few apiary locations, if I moved all my bees out, every now and then a farmer would call and say, "Hey, you moved all your bees out. What's going on?" Because they are just curious and they want to know. But if you leave a few behind, then they're not likely to call and alert the owner that some of the bees are missing because they wouldn't know that. They would say, "Oh, there's still bees out there." So that's probably why they left them behind. Now, you mentioned cattle. So a lot of times the cattle are tracked because they're branded, and
Yes.
the hives of the colonies can also be branded. And the way you brand them is you use very similar to like I branded cows. One of my back in Saskatchewan, I lived there. I was good friends with a cattle rancher, and I would be there for the branding, and I actually held the torch and the iron in my hand and burned the flesh of these little squirming, crying animals. And when I was doing that, I was using a tool almost identical to what I also owned at home to brand my bee boxes. So you could take that hot iron and you burn it in. It's kind of like a wood burning kit. You burn into the side of the box, and the frames themselves can all be branded. So
Right.
that way, whoever has stolen them, you can track, like if somebody suddenly showed up with bees or the bee inspector went out and about and saw this equipment, then they say, "Hey, oh, surveyors, weren't they the ones that had some bees stolen?"
Yeah.
And that's how they could be traced back. Anyhow, I feel really sorry for these people. It's hard enough to make a living with beekeeping, and then to have some jerk come along and rip you off, steal your equipment. Like, that's pretty pretty
Yeah.
sad.
And this person, whoever took the bees, you know, I don't want to make any assumptions, but maybe like it could have been the case they had a bunch of winter die off, a bunch of their bees died, and they needed an emergency bee supply, and they ran out of money. But now you just pretty much it's in that now it's again bees are in the hands of someone that can't really take care of their bees very good.
Oh, you can lose an awful lot of hives and not be somebody who can't take care of your bees. Like, that
Yeah, that's
happens.
true. Yeah,
That that does happen.
that's
I won't
yeah.
say that, but I will say that it's in the hands of somebody who stole some bees, and
Yeah,
I don't like that.
right.
So that's
And
certainly
this person is
not.
probably like, it's a significant 57 beehives, you're selling honey, you're doing something with it. So you're definitely telling others you're a beekeeper now. So and you're probably giving beekeepers a bad name just by the actions of who knows what else you're doing that people don't know
Yeah,
about.
yeah. I wonder if they could, those people, same people that stolen what they could maybe start bottling honey under a brand name that, stolen bees honey.
Oh, right.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder. That sounds like a, although people would misunderstand and they would think that, you didn't steal the bees, you stole the honey from your own
Right.
bees. Because some people
Right.
do think that when we take honey from the bees, we're stealing their
Yeah.
honey. It's kind of like when you shear sheep, you're stealing their wool. As long as the honey is being produced in excess, I can't really claim that it's being stolen. But now, when I lived in Florida, bee thefts were fairly common, and turf wars
Really.
were too. Sometimes people would go into an area where they've been keeping bees for 30 years, and all of a sudden there's some new guy in town, and they put a bunch of bees close to where your bees are. Um, and on that, um, what's going on there? You're flipping all over the place here, and I'm getting confused.
Sorry, I'm just
I'm gonna
I'm
I'm gonna
I'm
stop
just
stop your share.
oh, you're gonna
Sorry,
stop
I'm
my
gonna I'm gonna go. I'm gonna shut you down. Yeah,
just show me.
I was
Well,
I was in
no.
the middle of a
I,
story too, and now people who are watching this on the YouTube channel are gonna be thinking like, yeah.
well, no, I was trying to bring up bee thefts in Florida.
Oh, it's okay. I can talk about it. I've been there. I've seen it. I probably know almost as much as the reporters who wrote about it, although that might be a stretch.
Well, bee thefts on the rise amid surge of honeybee deaths.
Hmm.
Look at that.
Hmm.
Well, I know
Yeah,
we
bee
don't.
thefts are on the rise because of bees dying. So,
But yeah, sorry. Let's go
when
back to the Swire story. But yeah, sorry. Bee thefts are on
okay,
the rise.
you can shut that down.
Yeah,
You
shut
can
down.
close
Yeah,
that off.
yeah.
You bet. We don't want to abuse our abuse that we're doing with the Calgary Herald and using their hard fought um information and storylines. So
Yes.
I think we're going to move on from that. But I wanted to say that bee thefts in Canada are somewhat rare. Like that's not a very common thing for people to be stealing other people's bees in Canada because the community knows each other. Like we know each other. We know who's keeping bees. And if somebody suddenly has more bees or a new location and the equipment doesn't look like their usual equipment because it's painted differently, is a different size equipment or whatever, then it does raise some serious questions. In Florida, when I kept bees down there, for I don't know 7 or 8 years is all that wasn't there forever. But while I was there, bee thefts were very common, and turf wars were too. So if you had a location, where you've been keeping bees for quite a few years, and suddenly this new person in town, and they move in, and they've got bees near your bees, it wasn't unheard of for people in the middle of the night to go to the competitors' bees and dump gasoline inside the boxes. Not light it, just it just takes a cup full of gasoline, and all the bees die from the fumes from the gas without even having a fire. And that was one of the ways that people treated other people who were moving in on their areas, which is actually pretty rude, because if you got permission from a landowner to put bees on the landowner's property, then you know you can't argue with another landowner. You could go to them and say, "Hey, look, I've been keeping bees in the area for such a long time. Why did you let this other guy come in here and put bees? And I would have put bees here for you, but you didn't ask me." So the landowner would probably just look at this beekeeper who came along and complained and say, "You know what, you're a jerk." And that's why I let somebody new come in. But anyway, that was a problem. But a bigger problem, I have to tell you about this story. There was, when I was a youngster, 50 years ago, ooh,
Yeah.
almost 50 years ago, when I was a youngster keeping bees in Florida, there was a guy much further south. I was near the Orlando area, and there was a beekeeper who was set up near Palm Beach or Miami in that general area. He and his crew would go out at night and steal bees.
Mm.
And they would come back to their property and behind the locked fence and gates and so on. And they would extract out every bit of honey they could out of the equipment. They would shake out the bees into packages so they could dump them into their own hives because they were beekeepers. And then they would melt down all the combs so they'd have some wax. So you've got some honey, some wax, and some bees all separated out of the equipment. And then you've got all this equipment, so they burned it. They would burn all the equipment. And by morning, there would just be some warm ashes in a fire pit and a couple new drums of honey and 100 pounds of beeswax and some packages that they could dump into their own bees. And they did this for quite a while until they were finally caught. And the guy did time in the big house. Like this was pretty sad.
Yeah. That is sad because really they have, it seemed like they were good beekeepers, and if they just they didn't have to do that. They could have just provided for themselves. Like, I've always had this theory of like it's like we all have the ability to reach potentials, and you can do the opposite ends of the potential. You can either go the crime end, like you could be a really good criminal, or you could use that same intellect to be a really good whatever you want to be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the full story as it unwound was that the beekeeper had a expensive, serious addiction problem
Mm.
and needed more money than could be gotten off of his own bees. And I'm not going to say allegedly, though it might be allegedly, but the fact is he did spend time in prison for the crimes, and this probably was the motivation, though.
So
That
he
was
was
just
not only not only getting high on his own supply, but he was double dipping, doing both, getting high on the honey and the supply.
I guess so. I guess that's pretty sad. That's a pretty sad deal.
Yeah.
Anyway, that it involves bee theft for sure, and
well, let me tell you
yeah.
This I keep bees with my friend, and it's his colony, but sometimes I go out there to take care of it for him. And
okay, that sounds like me, right?
Yeah.
You come by, you helped me. Last time we recorded a podcast, you were in my bees. Yes. And we had Roseanne with us. So you guys helped me a lot because I have a lot of trouble getting around. So so you did you did my hard work, and I appreciate that. So who's his friend? Like, you don't have to name names unless you think it's
no. It just he's a new beekeeper. He just started last year. He's getting into it. But anyways, I went to the beehive and I checked on it, and then the following week he went there and he moved it. And he didn't tell me, or and then the homeowner messaged me. He's like, "Hey, where did the bees go?" And I'm like, "What the heck?" I'm like, "I thought they were stolen, but turns out, they got moved or something." But yeah.
Okay.
So there's there was a bee theft miscommunication.
Yeah, that was a bit of no communication.
Yeah, no communication.
Do you know why those bees were moved? No.
I think he didn't tell me because I would have advised against it, but somebody convinced them that they can create a lot of queens as long as they have one beehive. And if he gives him a beehive, he'll create a bunch of queens for him. And I explained them the logistics of creating queens in Alberta, but they still went along with it. So I don't know.
Did you you and your friend, you did not watch my Western Apicultural Society lecture?
I listened to it, and there's about 5% of beekeepers in Alberta know how to. Well, that was just I listened to the beginning. I didn't get, but it was Was
it that boring that you shut it off after just the first few minutes?
I'm like, oh, this is very exciting, and it's just like I used to sit down sometimes, and I would be doing work, and I would listen to an entire podcast in its entirety, like 2-3 hours long. Sometimes it would take me a day or two, but I would always get through it. But I haven't been doing that much, just listening to more.
What you just said really helps promote my lecture that I made. Like, anybody who's listening will have heard you say that you used to listen to these really long podcasts, and you'd learn a lot. But with mine, after about 10 or 15 minutes, you shut it off.
No.
So
it's all folks, podcasts in general.
Let's prove Bidzina wrong. Go to the Western Apicultural Society website. Look for their.
I'll put it in the link.
Oh, they do have a good YouTube channel with lots of really good discussions and so on. So definitely do that. Put a link in there. I'll try to remember to put one on the podcast too, so that people can go search these things out. And the title of my talk was "Even You can make queens, can raise queens, can produce queens. Even you, but should you?" So it's a question, but should you? And then I go into some of the reasons why it's so difficult to produce queens. And I'm really curious about who your friend got wrapped up with that thought that one hive of bees is going to, they're going to be able to raise lots and lots of queens from one hive of bees.
He's a new beekeeper from India, and apparently he's managed over 300 colonies there. And now
That's nothing. 300 colonies that hardly even get you started here. Okay.
I think he doesn't understand the scale of the beekeeping in Alberta yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. But he does know how to talk somebody into giving him a hive of bees to raise lots and lots of queens from.
Yeah. So
we should have this guy on. I'd love to talk to him.
Well, my
Yeah.
friend said, but the thing is, he has issue. I think he doesn't speak English well. So his grandson or his nephew is the one that convinced my friend to give his uncle the beehive.
Okay.
So
Okay.
we bring the translator on with him.
It gets a bit awkward.
Yeah, it does.
But yeah. So maybe not. Maybe
we just
not.
bring the nephew on, but no, it doesn't make it doesn't really make sense. Like honestly, I don't even know what I got to meet the guy. I feel like
I'd love to talk to a beekeeper from India. I mean, they have some of the best beekeeping in the world. They produce a lot of really nice quality honey, and they do have an ancient history of beekeeping. So it would be really interesting to talk to somebody from India who's keeping bees. That'd be great.
yeah, he must know some English, maybe he can, but well, I'll see if like he would be interested. It would be actually nice to hear his perspective and maybe get a second set of eyes to get a review of if he's legit or not.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. Well, that could be you. You could go out and chat with him and see what he's trying to do. Like
Right.
maybe I'm totally
Like
wrong. Maybe one hive of bees can produce lots of queen bees. I don't know how on earth you would do that, but then these are things I don't know. So it'd be
right.
interesting to see.
Yeah, like there were
Because you do
just
know that you need to get those cells started. So you could do that all in one hive. You could have the hive queenless for a while. I remember when we had Steve Clifford, who's now off on Canada's north of Vancouver on Canada's west coast. Steve Clifford was teaching us how to raise queens on one of our
right.
podcasts, and he showed how you could start your queen cells in a queenless unit that's made up of the same colony that would finish those cells. And then after the cells are big, then you have to take them out and stick them into mating nukes. Now that's where you have trouble. When you have one colony of bees, if you're raising finished queens, you also need a bunch of mating nukes so that the cells can go into a mating nuke. The cell queen emerges out of her cell and she flies out and she mates, and then she comes back and she lays for a few days, and then you find her and you can sell her, this time with an S, not a C. You can sell the queen that came out of your cells. Now you could also market cells, but there's not that big of a market for queen cells here in Alberta because the season is so short that if somebody were to purchase your queen cell, they would have to have a split or something ready for it, but then it's going to be a few weeks lost time in a very short season waiting for that queen to be mated. So that's not going to quite work.
Right. And this is a wild thought. We were looking at the seasons of New Zealand, right? And we saw that it was kind of opposite to the northern hemisphere because they're in the southern hemisphere. And so they provide bees to us in April. Would it be possible for us in Alberta or Canadian beekeepers to package bees up in September when there's a high population of them and send it off to other regions where they might be starting their season?
Right. We did talk about that. And on one of our earlier episodes, we talked just explicitly about that fact, thinking that at the end of a season here in Alberta, it should be possible to shake out all the bees into packages and ship them all to the southern hemisphere because it's spring starting down there. And if spring is starting down there, then you've got a chance to have a market for your used bees here. They would get the packages at the end of the season here. Now, granted, those are hardworking bees that have spent the summer working, so they're older. But I mean, give people 3-pound package instead of a 2-pound package. And in the spring in the southern hemisphere, it won't matter too much. They won't be flying much. They'll be, staying inside the hive, bringing in pollen and so on. Okay, so the idea that I was thinking with this whole scenario is that we could shake all of our bees out of our hives and sell those bees and put our equipment in storage for the winter. And then in the spring, start with new packages. And when you start with new packages, you have a chance to go through all of your combs and get rid of the worst ones because there are no bees in them. So before you put your packages in, you've looked at your frames. Your equipment is indoors. It's not getting wasted away out in the weather and so on. It's been stored for the whole winter. And then you put packages in. And as long as the package has a good queen and it arrives with enough of a, miticide having been used first in the production yards and then also in the
Which
shipping cage, then
yeah.
you would not need to treat for varroa mite for the whole summer. Like if they start off with 0 mites in the spring, by the time that mite population invades your hives and builds up to something that's bad, then you're at the end of your season.
Well, this could be like essentially like what you just described is the global version of what beekeepers are doing in cold climates. This would be on a global scale where, in Georgia, for example, we'll have beekeepers take all their beehives in the spring and summer to the mountains when all the snow's melted. And when the snow is going to fall, they'll bring it back down. So Canada is essentially a giant mountain, like one big mountainous region. And it's cold. Well, there's prairies and stuff, but it's very cold. So that would just it would just be on a like we'd be herding sheep. It'd be like herding sheep. You take it to the grazing land when it's snow's melted, and then you take them back home. But we do it with planes. So no,
Yeah. And when you mentioned Georgia, we need to because so many Americans don't know that there's a country called Georgia, and you're from that country called Georgia.
Well, they should know. We named one of their presidents. We named the street after their presidents. George Bush.
Yeah, George Washington Street.
George Bush.
Oh,
Street.
George Bush. Yeah. Okay. So Georgia. Yeah. Good.
Maybe
George
we should have
Bush.
done George Washington. Actually, that's holy. I didn't even think. Man, these Georges are all backwards.
No, not all of them. Just the ones that I know. Yeah. No. Okay. So.
Yeah. Sorry. So no, that's it's something that I thought about, but apparently New Zealand is like a bee island, bee closed island where they don't allow any imports. So New Zealand would be totally out of the picture. Australia is a consideration. Some of the Mediterranean regions, Southern America. Yeah, exactly. Southern America. Yeah. I mean, USA, like why not? Like Florida, Texas, like Arizona. This could like, man, people really don't like globalism, but it seems like it would be the way to go.
Yeah, I can kind of sympathize with people that, we're scared of foreigners. Like, I'm a foreigner in Canada and people are definitely afraid of me. And so, foreigners and globalization and all that. But it's so hard for us in Canada to be self-sufficient in avocados and bananas.
Right.
So we do have to, if we want to eat those. Now, somebody will say, well, you don't need to eat bananas. You don't need to eat avocados. You don't have to.
We don't need to do anything. We could just sit in home. Like,
Right.
why not just watch TV all day?
We have rhubarb. We have strawberries. Yeah. Pizza pops. That's great if they're raspberry or rhubarb or something like that, because we do grow our own wheat. But no, it makes sense to produce something in an area that has the resources for it. And in the case of raising queens, that's sunshine and skilled beekeepers and the right season for producing the queens. So we don't always have all those things working for us. And instead, we trade. We produce really, really good honey. We can sell that honey to people in Argentina or Chile or wherever. And then they produce queens and sell the queens to us.
Exactly. And, just the picture behind me, we have the Alberta wild rose, which is, native to Alberta. I think it's our national it's the provincial flower.
Mm-hmm.
And you could use it in teas, desserts, salads, even eye drops. Like there's so much things that, maybe a person from in Japan, they're like, why do I need Alberta wild rose? But I'm sure, excuse me, they would find value in it because they don't have it in Japan. So
That's right.
yeah, it's just, so we kind of
They probably do have roses in Japan, though, don't they?
but not the Alberta wild rose. I don't think the Alberta wild rose isn't it native to us?
Probably not, because then it would be a Japanese wild rose and not an Alberta wild rose. So you're definitely right about that. Um, yeah, when I moved to Saskatchewan, I remember one of my neighbors. She lived to be over 100 years old. Became a friend of mine. She wrote a couple of books about what it was like to be what we call métis up here, which means that she was part French and part native, like the indigenous people. And she made rose hip tea.
Right.
And I liked it. And she said it was, like one of the healthiest things you could drink. Well, probably was. Worked for her. And I don't drink enough of it. And look at the mess I'm in.
Well, you can make jams, jellies, and and other types of beverage, and it's rich in vitamin C.
Right, that's what she told me. She said you feel a cold coming on, you just whip up some rose hip. The hip is the red part of the rose after the flower is all gone. And in the fall, there's this thing that holds the seeds. Right. And that's where you make the tea and so on. So you make it out of the rose hip. So the rose hip tea, she said, and in the fall, a lot of times, the colds come along and the weather's changing. So you make, well, you could go 50-50 with the rosebud tea. At least I would do it this way. I'd go rosebud tea and then half rye whiskey.
Wow.
So then you've got a nice smooth drink, between the two. Yeah.
And that's you got a party going.
Well, just one of me, but yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, who knows, maybe. But
you've been out in your bees?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, we'll wrap up in about 5 minutes or so, but I want to know how your bees were looking when you went out there.
So the 6 out of the 7 have made it. Out of the 6, 2 of them were just bursting with bees. It was 2 supers on there. I got a chance to place both of them with another super, and no queen excluder. What I did last year, I'm gonna try again. The last year I did the same thing. The bees were bursting out of the 2 supers, so I put a second super on, and the queen went up to the third, and she laid eggs everywhere. And then I came back and then took a bunch of nukes from that third and second brood box, and she had eggs on the last, so I left her that. Mm-hmm. And so I'm gonna try to attempt to do the same this year, hopefully, but I don't know how the weather's going. And
well, we need the rain, so the rain keeps coming, and we're supposed to stay cold for a few more days. But things change. We could have one of the driest summers ever, even after a wet spring. You never know. But the thing that you can control is the strength of your queen, the quality of your queens, the strength of your hives, and how well you're taking care of your bees. And you keep those things in order, then you'll get the best crop you might be able to get. But past that, not much you can do. You take your chances.
Yeah,
you roll those
made a little bit
dice over and over.
Mm-hmm. I did kind of make a silly, like, rookie mistake of I put like a little bit of a feed, like my own homemade like appy pasta thing that I made, and it was just a little bit runny than I more anticipated, and it just kind of drowned a little bit of them. But then they eventually cleaned it up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I don't think I'm gonna do that. I think the feeder. Well, I don't know if the feeder is the way to go. Just the big the blue rim feeders. I think that's the one you have, right? Or no, you have the frame feeder.
I have a frame feeder, but
Yeah.
sure, the top
Carousel,
like the
yeah,
those are nice. Those are very nice, and they're easy to refill and so on. You have to
yeah,
open the hive and do it. But yeah, why not?
yeah.
Sounds really good.
I see that Daniel's back in town.
How do you know that?
I don't know. He's walked across enough of times to recognize him.
Daniel is back in town. He's back from McGill. He's finished there. We're gonna fly down in a couple of weeks for just a couple of days to witness his congratulation
Wow.
graduation. His
So
finished his
so
anyhow, he's coming out of the conclave. He's
yeah.
graduating, and he'll have his papers, and he's finished, and he's off to a new school. He wants to do a master's, so that's all coming up. But yeah,
Correct.
I've been trying to talk him into coming back on and having another good conversation with us. He's always a good interviewer, the interviewee. He's an E, not an er. Uh, but if he becomes a journalist, like he's hoping to do, then he'll be hopefully a very good interviewer.
Mm.
So he's here. And
Well,
Helen also came back. My daughter, she's the 18-year-old that's also at McGill. And Daniel will not be going back to McGill next year. He's going on to a totally different school somewhere else.
that's incredible. He beat me to it. Just I'm graduating next year.
We all have our own path, you know. It took me years and years and years to get a degree. I was 33 when I started university. And then I took the 4 years to get my geophysics degree. But I was 33, 37 when I graduated. But I still have had a career associated with with geophysics that's lasted over 30 years.
Wow.
So, that's long enough.
Never too late, folks.
No, it's not. No, it's not. And I may go back to the university where I have an incomplete master's that I've been working on. I still haven't finished that thing. I got pretty sick, heart attack, et cetera, motor neuron disorders getting worse. But all my research is done. It's just a matter of that I should be writing instead of talking to you on this podcast.
Well, you gotta have fun somehow.
Yeah, but you also got to have priorities. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
but this is fun. It's been fun.
I thought this was a priority.
No, never has been, never will be. No, not a priority. No, sorry.
Well,
it should be for you, but not for me.
I was under a different. I was under a different impression then. I hurt my feelings.
Okay, I just lost my speakers here, which I think is a signal that we are probably going to have to quit here. I don't know if I can still hear you. Say a word or two there for me, and I'll see if I can.
Hello?
Yeah, okay. I do hear you. That's great. But I also want to say goodbye. I think this has been long enough. My headset has melted, and we talked too much.
Yes. No, I said there in the end that you hurt my feelings. I thought I was under the impression that this was a priority.
Oh, I'm sorry that I misled you.
I know, it's okay. This isn't the first time it's happened. It's okay.
Okay. Well, Bidzina, good luck with those bees and you're working through your divides, your splits, your moving of combs, and your requeening and everything else that you're going to do. I hope everything goes well. We need a little better weather for all this to happen. And, now it would be a great time if a person had a bunch of queen cells and they were ripe and they were in their mating nukes here in Alberta. You would want the timing to have good queens by the end of May. It would be fantastic. But this is why we don't raise queens in Alberta very well. We do some. There's some beekeepers, but they do it a little later in the season, not at this time of the year. We're towards the middle of May, and even now, temperatures aren't much higher than 12, 14 degrees a lot of day, which is about 50 Fahrenheit, between 50 and 60. That's not mating weather. So you can't be raising queens here during May. You just can't depend on good weather for that to happen. Anyway, I do hope the weather straightens up so you can get into your bees and enjoy yourself with them again. Good luck to Herman. Talk to him. Get him back on here. I'd like to see, his firsthand what he's.
Well, we're thinking we could do a one and one by the BeeCube. So I could bring out the studio kit and
I like that. Yeah,
I got a tent and stuff. We can be in a ventilated, like it's a pretty big tent. It's not like a like a sleeping tent. Those ones with the air and stuff.
Fantastic. That sounds fantastic. Okay, so we have some plans for the future. I have a few other people who have been wanting to get on here, so I need to kind of line them up and get them scheduled and brought into here. But in the meanwhile, I think this is a wrap for today. We mostly talked about bee thievery and a few other adjacent topics with honeybees.
Yes. Well, thank you everyone for listening, and join us sometime next week. Mountain Standard Time, whichever time we post, but it'll be during Mountain Standard Time.
And whichever week we post.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's
not necessarily next week the way we've been doing lately, but we'll try to pick this up again.
Yeah, if weekly but I was thinking maybe actually it might be better to do something bi-weekly or something. Maybe that kind of keeps it fresh.
No. Then everybody will quit listening. We've got to get back to the weekly rate. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, then maybe you gotta make it a priority. Well, no, I actually like it's really difficult the people to really kind of like do all of this. But it is very fun, and sometimes he's right. It's priorities do come.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, you certainly had the priority of wrapping up your year at university. That had to be done right. So we didn't have a few episodes in that time period, but that's okay. That is definitely a priority. Anyway, folks, it's been great once again, and we'll see you whenever we come back on again.
See you, folks. Talk to you later.
Could be tomorrow, could be next month.
You never know. We need to suspension as much as possible.
Okay, goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye.